Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Breakfast special.
Welcome to Climate Connections. The Greater Mekong region, a vast area that straddles 6 countries across Asia, comprising China, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. It's home to iconic animals like Asian elephants, tigers, Sunda pangolins, and even giant freshwater stingrays. But as WWF-Singapore's Director of Conservation and Science, Sachidhanandam describes, the effects of human activities and climate change have started creeping in.
It's also known as the Indo-Burma Biodiversity Hotspot for species diversity, and it's home to more than 20,000 plant species, 1,200 bird species, about 800 species of reptiles and amphibians, and about 430 mammals. However, this region faces quite a number of significant threats, making conservation work quite crucial. So the Mekong area is also very vulnerable to climate change. And then this amplifies the existing environmental issues that they already face, such as severe storms and flooding, and also the human-induced habitat loss and overexploitation of natural resources. So in recent years, we've noted that temperatures in Southeast Asia have already gone up by about 1.5 degrees since the 1950s. And annual rainfall in the Mekong in particular has increased by 5 to about 25% due to more frequent extreme rainfall events. And this has compounded some of the challenges that this region faces. So as temperatures continue to climb, then ecosystems in the region start to face increasing stress, particularly if it's on top of human-induced activities such as illegal wildlife trade, for example, or deforestation. So we have numbers for deforestation. So we've realized that the forest cover in the Greater Mekong has already declined very sharply from 55% forest cover in the 1970s to about 34% today. And this is largely due to agricultural expansion because people need to eat, the food systems, and also infrastructure development, right? So this loss of forests not only weakens the ability of the region to adapt to climate change, it also has a lot of secondary lead-on impacts, such as habitats start to break up, so fragmentation happens. And once fragmentation happens, you increase the chance of poachers going in. And they are in there to collect animals, for example. And then this makes the ecosystem even more fragile. So as the situation now stands, we think it's quite serious in terms of biodiversity loss. There's about a quarter of all the known species in the Greater Mekong, which we're now quite convinced are at the risk of extinction. We've already lost the Sunda rhino from Vietnam. It occurs in several places, but in Vietnam, it is now extinct. So that happened back in 2011. There are also other species that scientists feel are going extinct every day before they're even being discovered.
With the region's natural habitats rapidly disappearing, only 30% of the Greater Mekong region's original forest cover remains, leaving many species increasingly vulnerable. Yet, all is not bleak. WWF's latest report reveals that 234 new species were discovered by scientists back in 2023. It's the culmination of the work by hundreds of scientists from universities, conservation organizations, and research institutes around the world. They discovered 173 species of vascular plants, 26 reptiles, 17 amphibians, 15 fishes, and 3 mammals. But just how significant are these new discoveries?
Every new species discovery is really a significant contribution to science, particularly in a biodiversity hotspot such as the Mekong. So every day, we estimate that we lose several species. And so it's really imperative we know more about every species as soon as we can, so that, if scientists, NGOs, and authorities and individuals can take action to sort of protect them, right? So the discovery of new species also has other interesting effects, right? So sometimes you find that a particular species might have maybe a specific genetic variant that you can use to help other species become more resilient to climate change, for example, using DNA work and all that. So that's one reason why we should keep, looking for the species and looking for them as soon as we can. And also we have a lot of medical compounds that come from plants in particular, and plants yet undiscovered. So we could be losing potential medicines for humans if we allow a lot of plant species to go extinct before they're even discovered and studied.
Among the many new species, some are big, some are small, but 3 particular species, each special in its own right, caught Uma's heart.
When I went through the report, 3 of them really stood out. The first one is a frog. It's called Junctisalus melanoleucus. I apologize for using scientific name because it's newly discovered and we don't have a common name for it yet. So it really looks like Kermit the Frog, if I can just use that analogy. So I'm quite fascinated the fact that tree frogs are able to stick on smooth surfaces like walls and ceilings because they just got sticky pads, suction pads on their toes, and they're also found in Singapore, right? So I've seen them in Singapore, and this particular one is bright green, just like Kermit. The other reason why I do like frogs and I do look out for them when I go out trekking and everything is because globally there's actually a fungal disease that is very quickly spreading. It's called chytridiomycosis, quite a long name. Unfortunately, it has already affected about 30% of all frogs across the world. And right now, really in the Americas, it's in Europe, but not so much in Asia yet. But there is a great concern that it will spread to Asia. And there's no cure at the moment for this fungal disease for frogs. So they are actually starting to die off in quite large numbers. And then the next species is actually a mammal. It's a shrew mole, which personally I've never seen. I've only seen pictures of it because they're super shy, and this was discovered in Vietnam. And they have these tiny little eyes and they look like they're blind, but actually they have pigment just under their skin where their eyes would actually be. And they spend most of their time underground sniffing around, and they have a bit of a long nose. Quite cute to see. So if anyone's interested, if you Google shrew mole, you'll be able to see that. And only found on one mountain in Vietnam called Mount Fansipan. And this is the highest mountain in the Indo-Chinese peninsula. They haven't been able to find it anywhere else as yet. And then finally, I picked a plant. I like this one because it's actually an orchid and it's leafless. So most of us associate plants with having leaves, but this particular orchid grows on other trees. It's leafless, so it photosynthesizes using its roots. And the nice little story about this particular orchid, the genus is Kylochista, and the species name is Quandangi. So Quandangi, the name, right, the species name, it's named after an orchid hobbyist who actually found this orchid on sale, and he managed to grow it and got it to bloom, and then donated those plants to a research team to study, and they found that it was a new species to science, right? And because of this orchid hobbyist, it managed to get discovered, and then now there's some efforts to sort of protect it. Now the unfortunate thing is it's now found that this particular orchid is critically endangered because they only know one location where it's found, and there are people who collect it from the wild. So this is an example of actually how a hobbyist, like the man on the street, can really become a citizen scientist and bring to notice species that are previously unknown to scientists' attention and get them the help that they need to get those areas protected.
Yes, you heard some complex scientific terms right there. So what kind of process do scientists go through to figure out if a species is new to science, and thereafter, how are they named?
So in scientific terms, when we say species, it usually refers to a group of animals that can successfully reproduce. And when they reproduce, the offspring is fertile, can also continue to reproduce. That's the scientific definition of a species. So species discovery can be made by anyone. So earlier I mentioned the orchid hobbyist. So he just happened to purchase a plant, and then we found that it was a new species. But after that, when you want to describe it and give it a name, right, and make sure everyone globally knows what this is called, then you need a sort of specific process. And in this situation, usually either the plant or the animal, scientists start to look at the physical characteristics. So we will look at what color it is, what patterning there is. You can look at the teeth structure. You can look at the limb or the appendage. You can even observe behavioral patterns if it's an animal, for example, right? And then in recent years, there's a lot of DNA analysis. So DNA can determine if the characteristics and we can confirm if this organism is unique as a species on its own. So we've been discovering a lot more new species because sometimes species look very similar to each other and you can't really tell them apart if they're all under one genus. So DNA is one way in order to determine this. So the example of the frog I gave earlier, it's got several other species in that genus that look similar to it. So in this case, scientists use DNA. They also analyze the call of the frog. So frogs usually call to attract mates and everything. So we use sonograms and they compared it with the other known close relatives and they discovered that 100% sure that this is a new species of frog that we've discovered right now.
So you might wonder, why are scientists so concerned about species loss when there are new species being discovered at the same time? As Uma alludes to, some of these new species are found in trade, both legal and illegal. This means that we could lose them to overexploitation before they're ever described in the wild. And this reveals a more sinister plight.
People like to keep animals that are new and different, right? So it's really driven by the collectors and the traders who are very eager to supply the market. So I can give you an example. So the sale of Siamese fighting fish, which I think most of us are familiar with since young, right? A lot of people keep fighting fish. So fighting fish have both what we call wild type, which is a species that is found in the wild. If you go into a swamp forest area, you will find the wild type. Not as colorful, versus the hybrid species where people have bred them over years. And these are the ones with beautiful colors and different body shapes, fin shapes and everything. So this wild type species, I have personally seen them recently being sold without regulation or control. So it's highly likely that they have been collected from the wild. And sometimes buyers do not know this, right? So many buyers will not know where these animals come from. They just purchase it from a shop. So they just assume that this is legally obtained because there's no documentation. So the same thing applies besides the fighting fish to orchids and a lot of other species. What really happens is the collectors frequently go into forested areas to start harvesting these plants and animals. So what can we really do? How can scientists help or other authorities help? So like for our organization, WWF-Singapore, we continue to raise awareness about the 3 key areas of the illegal wildlife trade. We talk to people about poaching, about the trafficking and what really happens when you buy. So we really try to stop the demand and cut off the demand, which is like the first step. So we really have to educate the public about what endangered species are and what's the threat to them if you continue to collect from the wild. We do have a public program called Cyber Spotters where we train volunteers to look at illegal wildlife listings on our e-commerce platforms. And we look at the listings and then we flag up those that are illegal and we get authorities to take action. Now, the Singapore authorities have also quite recently included wildlife trade offences as serious offence under the Organised Crime Act. This then enhances the penalties that are faced by offenders after they get caught. So these are some of the things that NGOs can do, we are doing, and the government is doing. But if you're a scientist or you're a conservationist on the ground and you're working with species, in which case I think very swiftly identifying a population size or the distribution, right, where are these species found is critical, because then we have the raw data. And once you have this raw data, we can go to what we call IUCN Red List, International Union for the Conservation of Nature. There is a list of species. And we can determine where and how greatly in trouble is this particular species. So are they endangered? Are they critically endangered? Are they just vulnerable? Or are they common? Right. So once you're in endangered and critically endangered, then we really need to take some serious action. So some locations for scientists are accessible and others are not. So if you're in an accessible location or you can't get to the location on time, then I would say if you know that a location is a biodiversity hotspot already, and there's several of these around the world that we know have got lots and lots of species, then the priority would be to just conserve that habitats as a whole rather than, I'm going to do a survey, I'm going to identify each one at a time. It might be too late. So those areas, it's better if you can get protection for them. So we need to prioritize these hotspots.
The challenges behind conserving species before they're gone do not just end with trade and climate change. Other human activities taking place in the Mekong are hugely changing the landscape.
No conversation on threats to the Mekong and nature would be complete without mentioning hydropower projects along the Mekong River. So WWF has been working on conservation projects in this area for the past 30 years. Now, while the Mekong region's economy has grown rapidly, this economic growth has also come with some environmental and social costs. So as of 2024, there are about 167 hydropower projects in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand and Vietnam. And in 2023, our office published a risk or reward summary report for the lower Mekong Basin, and we concluded that the hydropower dams are significantly altering the river's flow of water, of sediment and nutrients, all of which are really vital for a healthy river system and food security for the more than 62 million people who live along the Mekong River. And there's a lot of wetlands that occur along the river that contribute to the high biodiversity that we're finding in this region. So there's lots of birds, mollusks, crustaceans and reptiles. And in fact, if you're talking about fish biodiversity alone, the Mekong is second only to the Amazon River. So the Mekong has the iconic Irrawaddy dolphin. It's got massively sized fish like the Mekong giant catfish, giant carp, giant freshwater stingray. All of these occur along the river. But unfortunately, hydropower development has got severe environmental impacts. That includes declining water quality, declining fish stock. It causes incursion into riverbeds and riverbank erosion, and also collapse of freshwater biodiversity, particularly when there's flooding involved in previously forested areas once a dam is built.
Scientists and governments are well aware of the ill effects hydropower projects can bring. But because the process behind regulating such activities is long and complex, conservation efforts can only be taken one step at a time.
Because the Mekong really starts from up in China and goes all the way down to the exit point, what happens is there's many countries involved, and we have a rapidly also increasing population that lives along rivers, and there's a need for hydroelectric power. So it's a way where you can generate power, I would say quite efficiently, perhaps when they do their cost-benefit analysis, but it has a lot of, no pun intended, but a lot of downstream impacts for biodiversity when it comes to building a dam, right? So it's hard to coordinate between governments and their needs because there is increasing need for power in all these places, and it's hard to ask governments to stop. Although I do know that there is some progress in certain of these countries to put a temporary moratorium stop for building for say the next 10 years, but it's subject to change. So there are conversations happening between various organizations and the governments to see how can we slow down this process and not have so many, but it will take time to see what the outcomes of those things are.
That was Climate Connections on Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.